Drums keep pounding a rhythm to the brain. La da 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 dee. Da 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 da. Drums keep pounding a rhythm to the brain. La da 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 dee. Da 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 da.
All right, what's going on, everyone? Today, special guest will be Jesse Davies. Or Jesse Davis. I have to remember that
Jesse
one.
Davis.
Yes, I'm
Yes.
going to mispronounce that one a few times. Now, actually, Tony Firth corrected me last night after my stream and said it's Davis, not Davies. I'm well
Good
renowned
man,
for
Tony.
incorrectly pronouncing a name. So, thank you very much, Tony. Knew that I'd kick things off really well. Fresh off the back of what was an incredible run over in Japan at the Japan, world titles over there. So I'd like to introduce yourself, Jesse, and tell everyone what you do and what you enjoy doing.
Hey guys. So, obviously, I'm a RC driver. I drive for Infinity Creation Model, and I've been doing this hobby for about 20 years now. Started 20 years ago with my dad, just bringing a car home and just mucking around down to the netball courts and stuff, and just escalated over the years from that. And now we're here. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, right. And starting out, you started out straight into on-road as well?
Yes, yeah, straight away into on-road. It was back in the day, the 235mm class, which was it was quite challenging to drive as a beginner sort of thing, and then moved into the 10 scale, and then I didn't really actually drive 8 scale till I actually started working for Infinity. So I've actually only been driving 8 scale for about seven years, roughly 8 years.
Right. And you said you mentioned you started out with your dad as well. Did your dad do a bit of racing as well?
Yeah. He started racing, and I was sort of just kicking around the track and being a little shit sort of thing. And then eventually I got into driving. He got me to drive, and then after a few years, I started to get better than him. And I think it was the first time that I actually beat him is when he said, "All right, I'm done. I'll just be the mechanic." So,
that seems to happen quite often as well. I noticed it quite a bit with 10 scale off road, and one of the big, actually two of the names I can think of is the Parsees and also the Eggletons. They've done a very similar sort of thing, so it's quite common in our hobby. Once the kids start beating the old man, the priority
just
switches straight
just give
over.
up so you doesn't hit your confidence so much.
Exactly. All right. So yeah, we got a pretty decent bit of conversation we're going to have today. We're going to go over, obviously, your big trip over to Japan, the world titles itself, some results, as well as the incidents and stuff that happened during the actual event and the final result, that sort of thing. So we got a fairly decent chat on our hands for tonight as well. Hopefully most people are checking in now that I've fixed up my timing issue. Once again, thank you to Tony Firth for fixing that up as well. He messaged me about 45 minutes ago going, why does it say it's 8:30 when it's actually meant to be a 6:30 start time? So Tony comes to save the day.
Thanks,
for a second
Tony,
time.
Again. Yeah. He's a good man.
He's a legend. Okay, so yeah, racing sort of side of things, been racing for roughly 20 years. 8 scale, been roughly racing for about 8 years. And you mentioned there as well, driving for Infinity. How did that all come about? So did they contact you? Were you looking for a drive at that time for 8 scale on road, or?
No, at that time, they reached out to me, Kenji, my boss, and it was sort of out of nowhere. It was just sort of at a crossroads where I was going to keep going or not. And Angelo, actually, I don't know if you know Angelo. He's friends with Kenji, and at the time he gave Kenji my name and said, "Look, he's a good driver in Australia. Maybe give him a call." And that was when Infinity wasn't really started. It didn't have a car or anything. It was just more of a concept sort of thing. And he gave me a call and he flew me over, and we met him, and it all went from there. And sort of worked out. Ended up getting a car developed and all that sort of stuff, and that's where the company sort of started.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, they've also been delving a little bit more and more into the 8 scale off-road side of things as well. Did they sort of take a similar path where they were sort of slowly creating the car they wanted for on-road and then over time release it to the actual public, or what's the actual go with that?
I think the off-road sort of side of it right now is taking a little bit longer than the actual on-road took in the beginning. But I think that's due to just really trying to create a good car ready to sell and not have issues. So eventually, when that car does come out, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a pretty good car. So, but with the 8 scale at the start, it was just more of like Kenji really wanted to have fun, really wanted to get a car out there. So we pushed and we got a car out there, and it turned out to be pretty successful, and we worked on it and then got it even better.
Yeah. When the actual 8 scale off road car comes out, could we see you driving it potentially?
No, I don't think so. No, I haven't actually tried off road at all, and I don't
Right.
think it'll be my forte, to be honest.
Okay. No, fair
I
enough.
don't have I don't think I got the finesse in the air to try and control the throttle. I just hold it pinned.
Oh, there's
That's my
plenty of
sort of
people that
style.
do that as well. Don't worry. There's plenty of people that drive like that as well. And so, yeah, we actually covered another one of my sort of talking points here as well. You pretty much predominantly nowadays are driving for 8 scale GP cars, that sort of side of things.
Yeah. So normally, next year is the 1/10 Worlds. So next year, the focus will sort of switch to 10 scale, but not 100%. So like 8 scale is my favorite class, so I will continue to run 8 scale next year, and then maybe a couple events do the 10 scale to get some practice in and stuff and preparation, and then we'll go to the Worlds sort of thing. But
Right.
normally, this car is just so much more fun to drive than a 10 scale. So with the power and downforce and all that.
Yeah. I know a lot of people sort of refer to them as like almost door stops. So the actual
Yeah,
incredible
they're,
downforce of them, it actually provides you the grip through a lot of the corners. I've had quite a few people mention. I'd like you to either correct it or whether it is actually correct itself. A lot of the corner speed you actually gain by going quicker through certain corners, that sort of side of things.
Yeah, it's
Is that
literally the harder you drive it, the better it handles. So you
right?
can't drive an 8 scale at 20 kilometers an hour because it won't handle. So the faster you drive, the more corner speed you carry, the better it's going to handle, and the better idea you have of what setup changes you can make.
Mm,
So
okay.
obviously having a faster engine and all that sort of thing helps as well. So
Yep. And the lateral loads on the actual tires, the cars, and all that sort of stuff itself must be pretty intense, I guess, for the car to be sort of still sticking onto the track, that sort of side of things
yeah,
as well. Once again, obviously the cars are built specifically for that sort of racing, but how long do you reckon that it would have taken for Infinity to sort of design and build the car to start racing? What is that sort of rough period of time?
the first original car.
Yeah, probably the first original one, and maybe we'll talk about the latest one at the moment as well.
The first, I think that took like a decent 2 years before, when I started. There was a prototype car sort of bouncing around when I first joined, and it was sort of like a mixture and just a bit of everything and put together. And it was like geometry from like a Mugen and all that sort of stuff, and then put it all together. But it did take a long time to get that to where it was, and now to where it is today is it's taken a lot of work as well. Like Nikaido, our designer, he puts in a lot of time, and he's very specific and very clear of what he wants. So, and it pays out. We just won the Worlds with it, so it's his hard work definitely has worked out for us.
And you mentioned the designer as well there. What sort of background has he had leading up to that point? Do you know?
I'm pretty sure he used to design for Kyosho, so he was the Kyosho
Right.
head designer for the Evolver and all those sort of generation cars back in the day. That's as far as I'm aware. So,
Right, so a bit of
so
a
he has
storied history. Yeah.
he has a very, very good knowledge of RC cars dating back a long
Right.
time. So
Yeah. No, it's interesting to see sort of, I guess, designers come through, and stick with, I guess, this industry in a way as well. Because I guess, as a hobbyist, in my personal side of things, you don't see that much money in the actual industry itself, but it's interesting to sort of know the actual jobs that come through it. And realistically, being a designer or that sort of side of things is quite a high-paying job in general terms. So for, I guess, an RC car company to have a proper designer and stuff, it's I guess different to think about.
yeah,
But
yeah, you wouldn't really think about behind the scenes of what goes into it and that sort of stuff. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to the event of itself, and also Japan itself. So you went over to Japan, was it a couple of days before the actual event? You acclimatized much to the Japan weather, or
it was 2 days before. Arrived
2 days before.
basically a night before,
Right.
and yeah, went to the hotel, slept because we landed at night time, and then the next day we went to the track just to sit down, prepare, track walk, everything you normally do before a big race, and meet everyone, see the team again, and then get straight into business the next day.
Yeah. And we'll come back to, I guess, obviously the race and that sort of side of things soon as well. But did you spend much time after the actual event over in Japan, or did you sort of come back home
No.
afterwards?
So we Sunday is a rain day for IFMA World Championships normally. So Saturday the race was finished, and Sunday we actually went back to the track to test again. So
Right. Yeah.
and then so that wasted that day. It wasn't a waste. It was a good test. And then Monday I flew home. So there was no sightseeing. There was
No sightseeing.
nothing. No. Oh, at Sunday afternoon we did go to the Suzuka F1 track just to have a
Right.
look.
Yep.
That was just a little stop through, but basically just there to do the job and come home.
Right. Yeah. That's fair enough. I guess once again, it's a different sort of thing for yourself. I know that when I go over to an event, I want to see as much of the country as possible. And I've recently came back from the US and spent about 4 weeks on top of the actual racing event to sightsee. But I guess you see it. Do you see it more as a job in that sort of terms, or
100%? It's not really a holiday. It's I'm paid to be there to do a specific thing. So obviously if I wanted to stay after, I could do that, but we're just there to race.
Yeah. And Shap's actually just jumped in there as well.
After 10 days of racing, you don't really want to see sightseeing sometimes anyway.
Yeah, I can understand.
You sort of want to get home.
Shap's jumped in and said something important there as well. There was probably an alternative reason why you kind of needed to get home as well. And we had a very brief chat about it beforehand as well. You actually have a newborn baby as well just at home. So
yes,
we had a quick chat about that. And so 5 weeks old. So just before you went over.
Yeah, he's 5 weeks old yesterday. So he was 2 weeks old. 2 weeks old before I left. So that's another reason why the trip was it was a really hard trip for me. Not only with just racing and having missing him and missing the wife back home, and it gets a bit hard, especially if you have a bad day at the track. So it all builds up.
Yeah, Pete's jumping on in everywhere, future world champion. But yeah, so I'm obviously commitments back at home as well, and you're lucky enough to spend that sort of busy time for yourself away for work, as well as managing a home situation as well. So it's incredible time.
Very stressful.
Yeah, very stressful. I can imagine, man. And first time as a father as well. So first child. So
very first one. So sort of hits a little bit different. If it was the second kid, it's all right. I'll just go racing. It's fine. I already have one. So very, very newborn as you went over. So I'm sure that would have been playing on your mind a lot as well whilst you were over there. Okay, onto the event itself. I feel as if Japan is probably one of the countries that is highly wanted to race in for a lot of races around the world. I feel as if it's akin to probably the US in a lot of ways. There's so much storied background of racing within Japan and stuff. Did it sort of hit like that as well whilst you're over there? Yes, like I've always loved going to Japan. I've raced there a few times now at the K-Toon track and also the IFS track a few years ago. And it's sort of just like the pinnacle of RC. Like it's where most of the RC cars come from, brand-wise, the engines and all that sort of stuff. And the competitive nature that the Japanese culture have is ridiculous. Going to this world, it was one of the toughest worlds I've been to, with 130 entries, and it was a really stacked field. So it's always good to get out there and test yourself and go against the best drivers.
And actually, a couple of Japanese drivers to mention actually made the top 10 as well. Matsukura, Kuki Kato, and Shoki as well.
And Tadahiko, yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, 4 of them. Actually, one of the big stories. And did you know about Kuki Kato before you went over there?
Yes, he was actually pitting with us in TITC in February early this year.
Right.
And that was the first time I met him, and he's quite young. I think he's 16 or 17, I think.
Yeah.
and still I didn't know him at all then, and I seen him drive an EP car, and he was amazing. I was like, well, okay, well, this kid's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I was made aware that he was running 8 scale at the Worlds, and then Nato filled me in a couple of days before I arrived, saying, "Hey, this kid's pretty good."
Yeah.
So it's really good to see like someone that young do so well. So it's good, and it just shows you, like I said, the competitiveness in the Japanese is incredible.
Yeah.
And they actually had a few other young kids that were quite good as well.
Yeah, I actually got to meet Kuki Hato over at the US Off-Road Worlds, and I came to believe that he was a sole off-road driver from that event, as I never actually really knew of him before that event.
I think
and
this
then
is the first year he's tried on road at all. So
yep, so insane result to just
yeah. Look, we were all sort of speechless over there. So
yeah,
and the funny thing is that I looked at his car setup because I was quite curious as to why is this kid going so fast, and it was a very unique setup.
right,
a completely sort of different driving style to how I drive in particular, and everyone else in the team. So I think he's got a lot of future potential. So and he's a really nice kid too. So
yeah, he's an epic dude. I had a couple of quick chats with him whilst I was over there. He was pitted next to Christopher Sturdy, who was helping me out majority of the time whilst I was over there. So got to have a bit of a chat to him whilst he was there as well. When it comes down to mechanics and that sort of side of things, obviously you had one of the best people, around the track. Usually one of the biggest smiling faces, in my opinion, it would be Andrew Shapland.
Yeah.
So we'll go through that as well in a second. But who did majority of the Infinity drivers have their own mechanics? Was that sort of the general goal, or did you have one sole mechanic that was helping each driver out as well? Or?
No, normally every driver has their own mechanic that they'll bring from their country, their friend, in my case, my dad. But no one from Infinity turns up with no mechanic.
Right. Yeah. And
then
information
for the second mechanic, you can sort of ask someone in the team to help out. And I was lucky enough that Shappy was actually in Japan for the race. So, and we've worked with Shappy before, so it actually worked out really well to have that communication and stuff, and relationship. So
yeah. Oh, fair enough. Does information sort of flow through the team as to what's working, what's not, or is it sort of somewhat private information as well?
Normally we do. So we did like a setup sheet after every driver does a setup sheet in our group chat after practice, after qualifying, and then after the finals, we got everyone's setup sheets. Normally it's still a competitive nature. Everyone is trying to do their best, but we do share a lot of knowledge with everyone. So that's how we like to present ourselves as a team. As anyone can come up and ask any question, and we'll tell you what we're running. So
yeah, and that obviously would improve the actual overall results for the team. So it's a benefit to both the driver as well as the team itself.
100%. Yeah.
So yeah, it's important within a team, and I think it's important within off-road, on-road, the whole work. So it's good. That's good to hear as well.
Yeah. Well, the more information and knowledge you get from everyone, and the better you are in the long run, picking a setup and knowing what's right, what's wrong makes it easier.
Yeah. Okay. The event itself. How did you mentioned, I think before, that you actually driven at this track before, is that correct?
Yes, in 2019, 4 years ago.
Right. And setup knowledge and all that stuff, did you have much in the way of like a decent setup to sort of head over there with, or were you just coming in a bit blind?
No, well, the setup that I used last time was completely like it was a different car. So we didn't even go down that track, but we had, Nato, Tadahiko, all those sort of guys, Shimu, we had their setup sheets before we left. So we had a pretty good idea on what we can start with and what we can work towards, which always helps. Other drivers go there with actually no knowledge, and the first couple of days it's a struggle. So we were sort of lucky in that aspect that it's their home track. So that was pretty good. That was easy transition, but then to work on it yourself and to find that extra few tenths is it's quite hard.
Yeah, for sure. And much changes away from that original setup did you sort of make? Did you make major overall changes, or just tweaks here and there?
It's quite funny. So I started off with sort of Nato sort of setup roughly around there, And then for 3, 4, 5 days, you change everything, you do everything, and you're not quite happy. And I actually went back to where I started. So
Right.
it's just a Worlds is just a different experience over that many days. And you go through that many setups and that many freaking emotions and all that stuff, and you end up back where you started. So, but also
And
the track conditions were quite tricky the first 4 days with the wind.
yeah,
So it was hard to get a gauge on setup.
yeah, I was about to mention track evolution and stuff. Is there much in the way of the grip sort of comes up through the practice seating and into
Yeah,
qualifying?
it was quite big because they actually painted the curbs before the race.
Right.
So they were all fresh curbs, and the racing line on that track is basically on the curbs. So the first couple of days was basically just getting the track, getting into groove, getting the black line back down again. And like I said, the wind changed the evolution of the track a lot because one lap's good, and then you get blown off the track the next lap.
Yeah.
But after qualifying, the traction it came back up to where it was sort of before the Worlds, the Japanese drivers were telling me. So it took a few days.
Right, yeah. And that was another thing you mentioned as well, the actual wind itself. Explain how the actual wind affects the car, say in corners coming off the straight, that sort of things.
Well, it's just like if you're coming in a tailwind or a headwind, you can sort of deal with. But when you're coming into a fast corner or a hairpin like turn 2 there with a side wind into the side of the car, it just makes it almost impossible to drive. To turn in, you've got understeer and it's loose, and then the opposite way you're turning right, now you've got oversteer. So it definitely plays a lot of havoc with the setup and the driving, and a lot of us drivers were just complaining that we felt like the cars were broken, really, driving
Right.
around saying there's something wrong, this is not how the car's supposed to feel. But it was just when you got 100 people saying the same thing, you sort of pick up it's not the car.
Yeah, between brands and everything. And
Yeah.
yeah. Talking about broken as well. I don't know if you follow Formula One much, but it sounds as if they have already cancelled the first practice at Las Vegas as there was a loose manhole cover after just 20 minutes.
Yeah,
So
I've seen that
that's a
today,
good start to Vegas Formula One.
Yeah.
Classic. But yeah, okay. So a couple of extremities, I guess. Track conditions, I guess, increasing with grip over time, wind affected, that sort of things as well. So it makes it interesting throughout the actual. You're probably trying to chase the car as well as
Yeah. And you've got the morning runs. It's a lot cooler.
Yep.
Then you get to like 11 till 2 o'clock where it's just peak sun, just beaming down the track, and that changes. That makes the cars feel heavy. That makes the foam on the car softer, and everything just sort of works a little bit worse. So
yeah,
you have to deal with that, and then try and find a setup in those conditions because that's when like the qualifying is. So you've got really a couple of different setups. So it's really tricky to try and find to manage that. And then in the afternoon, it's so much faster again. So it's really hard to try and pick a base setup that'll sort of work in all conditions.
Yeah. Do you try at least to sort of set up for the condition rather than chasing the condition, or do you just find yourself just, as you say, just trying to find that sort of base setup that's going to work all the way from morning to afternoon?
Yeah, I try and my way is to find the actual base setup, and then to know, okay, in the morning run, the grip's going to be a bit better. Have a little bit more less toe out sort of thing, so the car's a bit freer. Then you can put that back in the middle of the day in the heat, and then again at the end of the day take it out. So that just little minor details I like to change to keep that car actually pretty basic setup, not basic setup, but the base of the car, and then just fine tinker it to those conditions. Because if you try and chase conditions, you sort of really get lost.
Yeah,
and that's when you can start to do your head in.
Yeah, chasing your own tail in a way. You're one step behind the actual conditions of the track.
Yeah.
Okay. Qualifying. So qualifying, you were, I think, top 5. Is that correct?
I think I qualified
I got the results
or
here.
eighth in total.
Yep.
I had really, really fun qualifying.
I'm trying to bring it back up again. I have it right here if it wants to actually work. Let's see. Qualifying. Okay, let's start from the beginning anyway. So qualifying round number 1, you had Absolute Blind to come out hot in P3.
Yes.
What went right for that?
Um, I couldn't tell you. It just felt good that in that run that morning. Like my car normally feels pretty good in a morning run.
Yep.
So I was quite confident going into that. I actually that round could have been better for me as well.
Right.
I had traffic that wouldn't open. It's very hard when you have 10 guys on the track and you're all sort of the same pace. And if you
Yeah.
sort of open for someone, that's maybe going to cost you a second, and that could cost you 5 places.
Yeah.
So that driver didn't open, and I had to sort of sit behind, and I lost a little bit. So that could have been a better round, but again, you'll take third any day of the week as well.
Yeah. And round number 2, I'm trying to find. I'm guessing you didn't have the best of runs in round number 2. You came in 15th overall for round 2.
I was actually having a really good run for round 2.
Right.
So I think it was the last lap. I had a crash with lap traffic again in Q2, and before that, I think I was in second place for the round if I just finished the next lap. And again, lap traffic. It was the same driver again.
Oh.
And yeah, he sort of made a mistake coming out of a corner, and I tried to overtake him and on the straight, and we had a drag race, and I ended up just running straight up his ass and just flew off into fence. So that was disappointing because that would have been a really good round to bank some good points, but it is what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, we won't go through all the qualifying rounds, that sort of side of things. But in the end, yeah, as mentioned, yeah, it came in 8th overall in qualifying. And I was under the impression early on, not the pole shuffle. I've forgotten the name of it now. Super Pole. I was under the impression that was for the top 10.
No,
but it's just for the top 4 drivers other than the pole. Yeah.
Yes.
Other than the pole position itself. So the actual pole position goes straight into the TQ position for the finals.
Yes. They're the next 4 fastest. Yep.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on the actual pole shuffle? That's Super Pole, I should say, the actual Super Pole.
I reckon
do you like the system?
I do. It's a good addition to our format of racing. It brings another dynamic, instead of just chucking. I think it used to be 4 people going to the final. I don't think it was ever the world's 4 people, but it's just when you're at the track and you're watching it live and the grandstands are full with like 50, 60 people, and you've got one driver on the track trying to do his best lap. It's a cool atmosphere, and it's enjoyable to watch. So
yeah,
it's definitely a good end to qualifying, to just relax and watch those guys battle it out. So I like it.
Because I think previous year's world title, which would have been a fair while back pre-COVID, I believe that you were in the pole shuffle for that one. Is that correct?
Yeah, 2019 in California.
Yep.
I was in the Super Bowl for that one. So
yeah, and you finished up.
In the Super Bowl, I didn't do very well. I changed the engine; it wasn't good. But I think I finished overall 7th that year in the final. Right. I made the final and finished 7th.
Okay, and actually, before we came on chat as well, you mentioned you've been to a couple of world titles. So, how many have you been to in general now?
Well, I couldn't tell you exact number. Probably around 10, 11, something like that. I've got all the medallions still in the cupboard, but I couldn't tell you exactly.
And that's between 10 scale and 8 scale, correct?
10, yes, yep.
Yeah.
And 1 EP.
One EP as well. And where was the EP Worlds? Which one was that one?
China. That was not very
good. Look, yeah. When you say not very good, I think in comparison to a majority of people, it'd still be an incredible result. If I end up
it was not very good, that one. No.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Okay, so qualified 8th overall. That puts you into the semis, and they do a similar sort of system to what we do over here for 8th off-road, where it's sort of like an
Christmas tree.
Yeah,
yes.
So like
semi-A, semi-B. Odds and even, yes.
Odds and evens.
So I landed in the odd or even.
Yep.
Even, I think.
It should be even. Yep. And your semi run itself, how'd you go on that? How'd the car feel? How'd you feel going into the finals?
I felt pretty confident going into the semi. I landed in I think an easier semi, you would say. Well, it's not very easy, but it was easier than the other one. And one of our drivers, Yuya Sahashi, who was P2 in the final taking off. I started P3. I already knew that he wasn't coming on the day. He had work commitments. So
All right.
that means we only had 9 cars in our semi-final, which is an extra chance to bump up as one less driver. And he happened to be in front of me, so I was a faster driver. So I felt pretty confident that I could just, drive around and stuff. I had a good start. I made a mistake after 3 minutes, I think, and just spun off in the grass, lost some positions, but then just put the head down and just did the laps. Ended up getting to the lead and just saving tires from there, really, and just saving the engine as well. So
yeah. And actually, on engines and tires, we'll run through that as well quickly. Whilst we got that. Before stream as well, we talked about sort of the amount of tires you were sort of allowed to have or allowed to purchase, I guess. So in 8th on road, you don't actually necessarily have a limit on how many you can purchase. It's sort of the limit you're allowed to, limit you're allowed to purchase in a way.
There was no real limit. There was, like I said, there was 12 sets pre-purchased, which is for your control practice, your qualifying, and 1 set for the finals, or 2 sets for the finals. Then you can purchase more if you need, if you bump up finals and etc. So I think in general, everyone was running maybe new tires every run. You could reuse the tire as well. You didn't have to just use new tire every run. So some people wouldn't even use 12 sets. You can get a couple of runs out of a set. So
right. And track time wise, how long would you expect to get out of a set of tires?
So in the semi, I was only getting 15 minutes.
Right.
So in the middle of the day, hot conditions, and the front right tire was just not having fun. So that was a struggle in the semi-final. The final, in the cooler condition, I was able to push it out to 20 minutes. So just 2 tire changes. So that saved a lot of time. That saved an extra pit stop. So
yeah. And for the people that don't know as well, 8 GP cars actually run foam tires. I know majority of other classes, whether it be on road and off road, still run rubber tires or have been running rubber tires for as long as realistically ever. Why is it that the 8 scale GP cars run foam tires?
I couldn't tell you.
Couldn't tell me.
As long as I've been running or know anything about 8 scale, then it's always been foam ever since I've been in the sport. So with my experience with rubber tires and electric, if I was to put rubber tires on an 8 scale, I don't think it would go very well.
Right.
I'd get maybe one corner and burn them out. So I don't even want to try.
I was going to say, have rubber tires ever been used or have been used at large events for 8 scale GP?
Not 8 scale, no. Okay.
I
know they have been used for 10 scale.
Yep.
In I think wet conditions, they run rubber tires.
Right.
When we used to run in the rain, but 8 scale, I don't think so.
Right. And preparation for the actual tires themselves. I'm guessing you have to true the tires and that sort of things. Just explain that sort of process.
At the world titles, it's controlled tire. So
controlled tires.
They are pre-trued from the Matrix factory.
Yep.
They're given to you before the start of the.
Oh.
Put them in on the car.
Lost him for a second. Here he comes. There we go. We lost you for a second there.
Oh, good. So they're controlled tire. So they're pre-trued, ready to run. So.
All right.
Normally, you would true them if you're at local track or something. You would cut them down to whatever preferred size you want.
Yeah, and so in general, then you wouldn't need to make any modifications to the tire for it to just chuck on the track.
Yep, nothing. You just we do ream out the inside of the rim, so it goes on the drive shaft easier. But other than that, you chuck it straight on, drive it.
Yep. Any added glue that you'll glue the tire to, or are they pre-glued and they're pretty?
They're all everything's pre-glued, and it's controlled, so you're actually not allowed to put anything on the tire.
Oh wow!
It's a controlled sort of environment, so nothing's allowed to go on it. I don't even think you're allowed to super glue the sidewalls or anything. So, yeah.
Okay, interesting. What else? And back to engines and all that side of things. Did you take over multiple engines for the actual event itself?
I did, yes.
Yep.
As we were speaking when we were offline, I didn't have the best preparation for the race, as the baby was here. I would have liked to have prepared more engines or had more engines. I sort of ran out of time, so we took maybe 6 or 7 engines with us, and 2 of them were a new version from OS, sort of prototype versions, and they worked the best. They were the fastest. They were my fastest engines, but I only had 2 of them to race for 10 days. So
Right. Yeah.
I sort of used those one day, and then sort of stuck with my other engines to just get through until we started qualifying. Then we put them all, the good ones, back in.
Right.
Where
And
if I had a better preparation, I probably would have had maybe 4
right.
of the good ones, and just would have been easier.
And when you say you swap them out, what's the actual reasoning behind actually needing to swap out a motor? Is it just starting to lag a bit? What's what's the
No.
idea
Well,
behind it?
with the good one, with my good engines, if they're good, there's no point in going out and clocking laps and minutes and fuel.
Yep.
There's no point in ruining the engine for nothing. So everyone takes their good engines out and saves them for when you need them, and we just use slightly slower ones. But it's really just to save them for when you need them, really.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And life in a general engine, is there sort of a life expectancy you usually expect to get out of a motor? We're talking like a couple of hours, or is it just?
It really just depends on how you look after it.
Yep.
A lot of people, depends how you tune. Some people tune
Yep.
engines very aggressively, where you won't get very long out of the engine at all. Where if you're saying sort of sitting on the safe side of things, your engine can last hours,
Right.
liters, and everything. You just change the rods, and they'll just sort of keep going. So if you look after them, then they'll last. If you sort of lean on them too hard, then they're not going to last very long.
Yeah. Okay. And over to fuel and that sort of side of things as well, because that's one probably big thing a lot of off-roaders probably couldn't wrap their head around, at least to start off with. For 8 scale on road, you do roughly about 4-minute fuel stops, or 4 minutes runtime before a fuel stop. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. Some people were doing, or in the finals, most people cut to 3 minutes 45, because as the tire comes down, fuel consumption goes higher.
Right.
So as you can imagine, in an hour final, we're pitting every 3 minutes and 45 seconds. It makes it feel like a really long hour.
Yeah. And at least Shaps was one of the people on the gun for yourself there. How would you rate his performance overall for the fuel guns?
He was he didn't put any fuel in my car.
All right.
I did see him pit for Richard and Takwu, I think, and he's quite good on the gun. He's pretty fast.
Okay. So who was fuel man for you?
My dad.
Is your dad? Okay.
Yeah. And he actually did quite well too. So
yeah. And Peter's given him a rating of 3 out of 10.
That's
I'm guessing that's for Shaps.
All right.
I'm guessing at least. I'd hope so. So yeah. We actually saw a bit of I think Shaps had a GoPro or something strapped to him for the live stream.
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay. So we did
That was
see him
a
actually
pretty
on the
cool-
stream.
Pretty cool view, I think.
Yeah.
Especially in the tire change, because he was on the other side. You could see the whole sort of car in front of him, tires coming on, tires coming off, sort of thing. So I thought that added a pretty good aspect to the race as well. I wasn't watching the race, but when I watched it back, it was a pretty cool feature. So
yeah. Luckily, Shaps didn't need to go for a toilet break or anything during the race, so that's a bonus as well. Could have gotten awkward. So yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Reaction times. Now, this is another thing I sort of noticed watching on the racing, coming from a 10 scale off road side of things. It's a lot faster pace. The corners, you're doing a whole lap of a track that would be probably twice the speed of the majority of 10 scale off road tracks, at least, in about half the time. Do you do any like preparation games for your actual reaction time to sort of get you into wheel knowledge, that sort of things? Just straight into it?
No, I used to play VRC a little bit.
All right.
But that actually made me drive worse in real life. So
right.
I stopped playing that. But when you've been doing it as long as us guys and the top drivers have been doing it, it's second nature, really. So
right.
But I will say, the older I get, the harder it is on the eyes. But yeah, you just sort of know how to do
it. Pete, good old VRC days. Yeah.
Yeah, me and Peter have had some late night VRC days. So, but I always won, Peter.
Okay, on to the actual finals and that side of things. So you've been through the semis. You got a win in the semis. Put you. Well, actually, it's based on laps and times how you qualify into the final, isn't it, as well?
Yes. I'm not 100% sure on how it works. I think first place and first place from both semis go third and fourth, then
Okay.
second and time, or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. It sort of seems to change every time I go to a race. But
Yeah. I was under the impression that it sort of pits both groups against each other in a way, but once again, I could be completely wrong. That
no, well, I think you're right. In the end, it was who the faster time, and in that order they went into the final.
Right.
But no,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So if we just go back to results, so into the into GP even final 1-1. So you ended up starting off fifth.
Yes.
No,
Yep.
fifth. Okay, it was.
I think
correct.
it was fifth. Yep.
Yep. That sounds about right. Fifth overall on the actual final itself. And you had a pretty decent start. You were battling all the way up to P3, I think, fairly early on, weren't you?
Yes. I think I was in third, maybe because Shoki blew his engine in the first 2 minutes.
Yep.
And I think I might have been fourth. Might have been into fourth. And then I was running a little bit later on fuel stops. So
yeah, you were up to fourth pretty early on. You actually bumped into second during the fuel stops around lap 32. But you're battling sort of third, fourth, and fifth spot for a good portion of sort of that early to mid race.
Yeah, I sort of made a mistake I think it was the 4 minutes in. I ran wide off the left side of the track, and I got stuck on a camera. So I sat there for about 5-6 seconds waiting for a marshal to get me off the camera stick, the tripod. So that wasn't ideal.
Oh yeah, that's a good comment actually coming from Tony as well. What happened at the start of the final? We saw some frantic work going on in the pits. So
yeah,
explain what actually went on there.
So that was quite fun, to be honest. That was an electrical problem. So I've got the car here. I don't know if you can see, but I run a electrical lead here, and the actual tip of the lead broke off before the start of the final when we're sitting there to plug it in to start, and it wouldn't plug into the actual port. So I had no power at all. So they ended up, I think they ended up cutting the wire and shoving it in the port, and then using cleaning putty gum and jamming it in there to make it stay in there. So to be honest, I was lucky to start and I was lucky to finish, because I could have come out at any time.
Shad's jumped on Tony Firth. It was a classic. Watching the race back, seeing Jesse step back on the roster and pacing back and forth. His face said it all. Yeah. So that would have caused some nervous moments at the start of the race, let alone throughout the entire race. I mean, were you thinking at any point that could just pop on out? Did you know that they fixed it like that, or?
Yeah, because there was actually a delay called for. I think Dominic Reiner called a delay, which was quite lucky because it gave me time to do it and I didn't lose my grid spot.
Yep.
And yeah, Shappy assured me that it was not coming out. So I didn't think of it all that in the race. It didn't even cross my mind, to be honest, the lead until I finished. I was like, oh, well, that's pretty lucky too. So yeah, that was not the way I wanted to start the A main, because I was quite relaxed before that, and then I lost 5 minutes in preparing my tires and having to break them in and stuff. So
yeah. And that's actually another point as well. A lot of drivers we saw sort of breaking in different sets of tires throughout the actual warm up of it.
Yes,
is that sort of fairly standard for the 8-scale GP sort of things? That drivers will break in, say, 3 or 4 sets for the actual race. So
normally we break in like 3 to 4 sets. One mainly because to do a tire change during the race and to put a fresh set of tires without even doing a lap on the car, it's not, with a warm car and you put it down, it's not very enjoyable to drive, and it's not good for the engine and all that. So we normally do a couple minutes on the tire to break them in, get the canvas set, all that sort of stuff. and then it just makes it a lot easier to transition in the tire change and to drive straight away fast. So,
Right.
and
Yeah,
then
so a bit of a
sometimes you do a few more sets because some sets maybe feel a little bit better than other sets.
right, just a bit of a breaking process to find out, what you feel more comfortable with whichever tire and that sort of side of things, in other words.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And the finals itself, I mean, you had a pretty incredible run starting out at fifth, battling for that sort of third, fourth position for a good majority of the race. As you mentioned there, a bit of a mistake, sort of, I think it was around that mid to probably the sort of 3/4 of the mark of the race through.
Yeah, I had another
And
one. I flipped on the curb.
yeah. And I think we saw you actually work your way back from, I think it was about 7th place and
I
back
think it
into the
was,
sort
yeah.
of, battle for the third spot again.
Yep.
How'd your car feel for the entirety of the actual race itself?
It actually felt really good. It was actually the best it felt sort of all week, and we finally got the engine tuned to exactly where I wanted it, sort of thing. And it was just more about staying focused and concentrated on what I was doing, which is it's quite hard for an hour to focus on
Yeah.
these little things zipping around. So I had a few lapses during the race, which cost me a lot of time. But like that's racing, everyone makes mistakes. The other guys probably made mistakes too. So
Yeah. Okay. And obviously the thing we have to sort of talk about would be the actual finish of the race itself. So
yeah,
holding on to third place towards the end of the race, after as we've sort of gone through almost an hour of running at that point, pretty solidified, I guess, in third for quite a while.
yeah.
And we've got a bit of video and stuff. We'll chuck it up whilst we sort of talk about the incident. You can sort of talk us through it as well. If I can work out one of them, and not that one over here. There we go. Yeah, just sort of walk us through. I guess it's going to start off with the very last lap of Tony sort of finishing things off, and then cut over to you battling out with Simon, I believe it is.
Yes.
Walk us through pretty much the going ons of the actual race end itself.
It was pretty intense. I don't know where we're at here. So like I said, with tire wear and stuff, I was actually out of tires. My front right tire was actually finished. So I had to really manage turning left. So around the sweeper and the second corner. And I think it was the third last lap. He came down the inside and sort of T-boned me over the track. And in that instance, I knew, like, if I crossed back over the track, because Tadahiko was also right behind Simon, that I've gone straight from third all the way to fifth with no fault of my own, with 1 lap to go. And I was like, all right, well, that's pretty shit.
Yeah.
So I decided to just keep going on that side of the track and it sort of let them catch up. So I gained no advantage and I didn't lose anything.
Yeah, try to get to that point here on the video, if I can bring that up. Yeah, here we go. So this is the corners and stuff you were just mentioning there. So the first 2 corners.
Yeah. I can't really see, it's too small on my screen. Yeah, that's the first incident.
Yeah.
And I decided just to keep going.
Which you actually sat there and waited for a very reasonable amount of time as well for them to virtually catch back up to
the
roughly your position.
next couple of corners I slow down too, so they catch right up as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't the right decision to make, but when in the heat of the moment and after an hour final, like it just came naturally to do that.
Yep.
And then then I had a body tuck, so I had no tire left, and then I had a body tuck from him hitting me. And as you can see on the last lap, I couldn't get around the last corners, and we did some bumper carts and ended up at the finish line at the exact same time. So
yeah, and that's another thing as well. You mentioned before we came on stream as well, and I sort of noticed it actually in watching the stream. Your car looked to be in front as you cross the loop.
Yes.
So what was the actual general ruling when it came to that sort of things as well?
I'm not like we spoke about. I'm not 100% sure on the rule, but I think the painted white line is classified as the finish line. In this case, it wasn't, because I did cross the white line before Simon, but like I said, the timing loop was sort of in a different spot. So he's and his transponder is actually mounted in a different spot to most other people. Our car in particular it's mounted right next to the clutch here
Right.
in there, so quite far back, where Simon's is mounted right at the front here on the servo. So it's maybe 100 mil. So that 100 mil gets you 0.003 in front.
Yeah. Was it a bit of I guess, a bitter pill to swallow, missing out by such a small margin, even though your cars at least look to be in front over the line?
It was it wasn't as hard as you would think. I was quite happy with my result regardless.
Yep.
And I had made the mistakes in the final that cost me third myself. So
Yep.
whatever happened at the end happened, and that's racing. You can't stop it. There's always
Yeah.
going to be incidents, and that's racing. That's why we do it. So
Yeah, and it's a good way to look at it as well. Yeah, incidents will always happen on the track. That, and realistically, we're talking about small cars, whether it be 8 scale, 10 scale, 5th scale, even that are anywhere between 30 meters away from you to probably
going 100 k's an hour.
Yeah,
controlled by 3 fingers. It's
Yeah.
Anything can happen. Like when no one's out there to deliberately hit anyone. We're all out there to race. So
Yeah.
anything can happen on the track.
But yeah, no, and in the end, 4th place overall, you're going to be absolutely stoked with that sort of result in the end as well.
Yeah, I was really pumped with that, man, to finish in that spot. And from where I was sort of in qualifying and some of my down days and stuff, I was pretty happy with that, to go over there. And like I said, the field was actually the hardest field I've raced at in a Worlds. And to finish just shy of a podium, it's fine. I'll take it. It's a good result.
Yeah. Do you know what block will be holding the next world titles?
No, they didn't tell us, but I would assume that it's a Europe block, EFRA.
Yep.
Because the last one was Raw, then this one was Femcar. So I'm guessing it's going back to EFRA.
Yep.
But normally they tell us at the race where the next World Championship is. But they didn't. I think they were a bit caught up in their other politics that they were sorting out. So we didn't get told on that.
Yeah, and so there was quite a lot of other sort of stuff going down with IFMAR at that event itself, and I caught a little bit from the actual No Name podcast just the other day. All sorts of, I guess, in a way, drama going down at the actual event. So interesting big changes over at IFMAR as well. So yeah, hopefully, I'm guessing that probably will get announced probably in the next few months to find out where it's coming out and possibly find out the track that it'll be held at the next couple of, I guess, next year or so as well.
Well, next year we already know the 10 scales in Costa Rica, the World Championship. But after that, we're unaware of the 8 scale, the next 8 scale one.
Yeah. Actually, mentioning that as well, 10 scale over in Costa Rica. Obviously looking to go over to that one.
I will see. We'll go through it and see if it's worth going. I think I've heard of some people that it's okay to go to. I've heard of other people that maybe it's too dangerous to travel to for a toy car race. So we'll go through all that next year in the team and talk about what we're going to do.
Yeah, and fair enough to that as well. And if you don't feel comfortable in a country, it takes a backseat to, driving takes a backseat, or RC car racing takes a bit of a backseat to that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Now we sort of touched a little bit on it as well before. I'm going to chuck that out. I'll protect you.
Yeah, I'll pay Peter to come.
Classic. We touched a little bit on it before, the actual new Infinity car. So what sort of changes have you sort of seen between the previous version and the actual new model of the car?
We've got a couple of pretty big changes. One is mainly the chassis plate of the car is completely redesigned, and the geometry wise is the same, but the configuration, they've changed the chassis width and the depth and all those sort of changes. The rear of the car is changed in roll centers, the rear roll centers, the rear sway bar positions, the rear shock positions, the rear body mount positions. You keep going on with that. We have new rear bulkheads for the new 2-speed shaft, which has gone from an 8 mil shaft down to a 6 mil shaft to generate a little bit more top speed and less load on the engine.
Right.
And there's just other little features all around it. So it's a really big step, and like evolution wise from our IF182 car. So we're all the drivers are really happy and pleased with how Nakaido has done with designing this car, and even for the average customer now, it's quite good. It's just to drive straight out of the box with the setup. The predecessor, the IF182, was you'd say it was a good car, but the rear traction was a little bit less, so it's quite hard to drive for some people. Where now they've really redefined the rear of this car, so it has a lot of traction.
Okay. No, and sounds like at least some quality changes, not just for the top level drivers, but also, as you say, the
it was
average
it
Joes
was
as well.
more directed at customer base, being able to have a car that's a lot easier to drive. So and then to just redefine some other parts because they're a little bit weaker and stuff. So they've done pretty well with that too.
Okay. And a bit of a comparison, I guess, between 10 scale and 8 scale. What's it like working on the actual 8 scale cars? Is it fairly easy to work through them, changing parts out, fixing broken parts and stuff?
It's quite easy, yeah. If you know what you're doing, if you crash enough times, you're gonna know how to do it pretty quick. Which I do. So it's quite easy to work on. 10 scale is a little bit harder, obviously, because it's a bit smaller and more finicky, and trying to get your big fingers in there and stuff, it's a lot harder. So an 8 scale is definitely easier to work on, and it's more enjoyable too. So
yeah, right. Before we sort of start to sort of wrap this up as well, if anyone has any questions for Jesse, by all means, chuck them into the comments, and we'll chuck them up as well. But next thing, I guess one of the last things to sort of talk about will be Nationals down in Melbourne, as you mentioned before the stream as well. You're heading to that as well.
Yeah, so the Nationals what week are we in? Next week at my home track in Lilydale. So we've got 10 scale, 8 scale, and I believe GT is running also in the Nationals. So that'll be fun. The weather's looking really good. We've got about 48 entries, which is not so bad. It could have been a bit more, but a lot of people, it's hard to travel at the moment with interest rates and stuff. I understand. So
yeah,
to get 48 entries is still really good, and we're going to have a really good time there. And there's a few interstate drivers coming, so that's always appreciated.
Yeah. Biggest competitors within Australia, who would you list off for that one?
That are coming?
Yeah.
That are coming, I've probably maybe Nick Salib is pretty fast. I think Peter's going to hurt me if I don't say him. So I'm gonna have to say Peter as well. And I think there's a couple of guys from Sydney that should be around the pace. So
right, yeah,
we'll definitely wait and see. The 10 scale class I'm not running, but that's going to be a fun class to watch with Braden. You got Tate Firth coming, and apparently Jeffrey Mackey's trying out 10 scale.
Oh wow!
So interesting to see how that one goes. And you've obviously got PD as well running the 10 scale and the Capricorn car, which is pretty good around the track. So it's going to be actually fun to watch instead of race.
And a bit of a flashback as well to a couple of weeks back where we had the GT Worlds over in Australia as well. There was no temptation of potentially jumping in for a bit of GT racing?
There was, in early days, I was actually speaking with Peter to maybe travel with him to go. But luckily I didn't, because my baby was born on the Friday. So that wouldn't have worked out too well. So I knew the due date, and that sort of got canned straight away. So.
Yeah. and people are jumping into the comments and suggesting other names as well. Oh, that's not the one, but
I have used his teeth as a pit light before, yes, in the toilet.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes, I didn't actually. Sorry, Andrew. I only just found out yesterday that you're coming to the Nationals, because you're not on the entry list. So that is your fault for not being on the entry list. I didn't know. So I'm actually not sure if Andrew's driving or if Jasper's driving. I actually don't know. So you want
Yeah.
to tell me right now? I'll
Come
be
on,
happy to
Shaps.
answer.
Um,
But I'm pretty sure that Andrew Chaplin's probably a bit keen to have a drive on my 8 scale because that was his one wish on the practice day, but he wasn't actually able to get that done
right, there
because
you
he went for a 2.5 hour lunch. So if he's lucky, he might be able to get a wheel.
Yeah, there you go. So Shaps is having a
And
drive as well.
Well, if Shappy's driving, then he's up in there in my top 3 too.
Right.
If he shakes off the cobwebs, so
Early blows, early blows. Ah, jeez. No, all good. Like I said, any last questions and stuff you have for Jesse over here before we really wrap things up here. But before we say anything else, thank you very much for jumping on to the actual stream as well. I
No,
know it takes
thanks
time
for
out of your
having
day, and obviously the nice little mess up I did as per usual on the time slots. I'll get daylight
It's fine.
saving times nice stuff down one day. Probably
No,
not.
it's fun to be on here.
But no, I appreciate it. No, I appreciate you sharing your stories and stuff from over at Japan, and incredible results from over at Japan as well. I think a lot of people tuned in probably for one of the first times for an 8 scale on road GP to watch some Aussie drivers have a really good run, including obviously yourself.
Yep. It was really good. I got a lot of messages and support from a lot of people back here, so I really appreciated that, and that actually helped me a lot through the week, and especially before the final. So that was good to have the support of the country behind me.
Yeah, and I feel like it's getting more and more accessible to actually watch streams and stuff. Not that it wasn't accessible probably 4 years ago, but I feel as if it's a lot more out in the public
these days with all the streaming and live RC and all the videos feed and all that, it makes it a lot funner. Your friends at home can watch you, your family obviously, and it's just it broadens the audience as well to the sport. So it's really cool.
No, perfect. No, once again, man, I really appreciate you jumping on the show and having a bit of a chat with me and explaining your side of the hobby, a side that I don't actually get to see too much of down in the beautiful Gold Coast, which has no real on-road racing. So but thank you very much for jumping on, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, thank you, man. It was really it's a good time.
Too easy, man. And for anyone in the chat, thank you very much for jumping on and all the comments and all that side of things. We'll see you guys all in the next one.
All right. See you guys.
See you later, guys.